One thing I would say is the action gets a little repetitive. There's so much action, it can sort of get boring. You start to zone out, which it's sort of Zack Snyder's thing. You either love him or hate him, and he's very prominent for his big action. He's a very visual director. But if you really love just seeing Superman beat the shit out of stuff and destroy cities, then this is the film for you.
Welcome back everyone, it's your boy Big Man, Big Bucks. Today I thought I'd do something a little bit different, and instead of talking about a book, I'm going to talk about the new James Gunn movie, Superman. Now, I don't really like to veer away from my normal topics of kind of books and comics. However, I kind of feel as though, it goes without saying that a superhero movie, kind of falls into that area. So it feels only right to talk about my feelings on this film and my personal kind of history with the character of Superman and why Superman to me is such an important character. As you saw from that original clip, that is a video from 12 years ago where I'd made a review of Man of Steel by Zack Snyder. Now, at the time, I had actually quite enjoyed it, but definitely had some criticisms, which I think a lot of people had very similar opinions on. The atmosphere and vibe of the movie was a very different approach to what we'd kind of known. At the time, as you can imagine, if you know anything about kind of DC Comics and the history, we were kind of freshly into an era of superhero comics within DC called the New 52, which is certainly how I kind of got into reading DC. There's some really great stories in there, some fantastic Batman stories particularly. However, it was a bit of a fresh take on Superman. Superman was no longer the kind of Boy Scout that we know from, the classic movies and comics. Superman was a bit more dark and gritty, and, in respect of kind of the vibe at the time, that was definitely the popular thing to be doing. We were fresh off of the Dark Knight trilogy, which was a much darker tone than we'd seen any kind of DC project before. So it was only fitting that kind of the movies would fall in that same sort of pattern. However, for me personally, it felt that there was something missing. There was definitely something that felt as though there was more to be done with this character, and it felt like a lot of what I loved about the character was maybe not there. And I think at the time I didn't quite realise this, because I'm a huge Superman fan. I grew up with the original Christopher Reeve series. They are to this day my favourites, even 3 and 4. I was very much desperate for some kind of adaptation of Superman in some way. It's worth saying that Man of Steel was kind of centered around this kind of darker vibe, and subsequently became the sort of vibe for a lot of Zack Snyder's projects, mostly because people forget this, and maybe not everyone was always really aware of these things at the time, but it was originally the plan to have Christian Bale's Batman team up with Superman and have it interconnected world with Nolan movies, with Christian Bale returning as Batman. However, that never came about. Obviously, Christian Bale didn't want to do it, so that's when we got Ben Affleck, and the rest of the story. So for me personally, I felt like there was a lot missing there, and I love the character of Superman. And I've talked about before, some of my favourite comics of Superman's is stuff like Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman, the stories that show hope and good, fun character that is just like an overall nice person. That's what I like to read. I like to read about Superman being good. It's just how I like Superman to be. Don't get me wrong, it's interesting to see a different take on Superman, a more darker take, and there is content out there for that. As I say, the New 52 Superman kind of goes a little bit down that road. Obviously, you've got other iterations like The Boys, which is, obviously a spoof of Superman with Homelander, and of course, Invincible as well. We've got like the Injustice games. They all kind of came out in this era where we were just getting this dark, slightly evil Superman, or an iteration of Superman that was dark and evil. I was just so done with it, man. So when I heard that they were going to be rebooting the universe and centering around James Gunn creating, starting afresh, basically, a soft reboot with a new actor, new characters, new scripts, everything of that nature. I was pretty on board, to be honest. I know a lot of people were very skeptical, especially how things kind of ended with DC. Not going to get into it on here, but I was very, very hopeful, because to me, I'd been feeling for a long time that I'd wanted to see a soft reboot or just a full-blown reboot. I have not watched DC projects since Batman vs Superman, to be honest. I think I may have seen Wonder Woman at one point on TV, but not actively. I've not gone to the cinema to actively go watch anything since Batman vs Superman, other than the Batman with Robert Pattinson. Obviously, that's a separate thing, and like Joker. But in general, the actual main kind of, connected universe, I've not bothered with anything. I enjoyed Zack Snyder's Justice League, his director's cut. Again, still not the Superman I personally look to see. And that's and that's okay. It was the route they were going for at the time. It was the popular option to have at the time during the sort of 2010s into late 2010s. In that regard, I've been very excited about this movie. I've been following everything about it. The trailers, everything, ignoring kind of the skepticism and wanting to go and see this with my own eyes. I didn't get to see it on the opening night because life gets in the way, and I'm a dad, and it's just not something I'm able to do. But I did get to see it the other day, on last Tuesday, and I had a fantastic time. I think this movie is amazing. It hits every beat that I love about Superman. It's warm, it's great. It's just everything about it is just everything that I fell in love with that character of. It's such a great, refreshing take on the character, and in a world of kind of dark and gritty kind of era superheroes, we're finally coming out of that world, and we're now finally moving into what Superman has always been. And I'm not wanting to go into loads and loads of detail about this, because it's been said everywhere. I mean, I've certainly seen loads and loads of discussions on it. You can get into the politics of Superman. You can talk about super woke and all this nonsense. It's Superman. This is one of the most accurate representations of Superman we've ever seen, next to Christopher Reeve's portrayal of the character, which is still my favourite. But David Corenswet absolutely smashes it out of the park. I love this movie, man. It made me just feel like a little kid, when I watch these characters that I've loved my entire life. And Superman, without a doubt, delivered in all areas there. Things I particularly enjoyed: the music, absolutely amazing. Perfect choice to keep in, kind of similar to the John Williams score. It's not Superman without that. I think it goes hand in hand with kind of like the Bond theme. Obviously new iterations of James Bond, they still keep the traditional theme. I think with Superman, that's the right way forward. You can make changes and make slight iterations to it, but keeping the same vibe. That's absolutely the point of the theme. It'd be like Star Wars without the Star Wars theme. It's just, if you make a Superman movie, you got to have it. So absolutely loved the score, the vibe that score gave off, and just all the plot points I really enjoyed. I just enjoyed David Corenswet's performance as Superman the most. Everything. Lois Lane, the actress played Lois Lane. Again, I'm not big on loads of actors' names, to be honest, but the woman who played Lois Lane, fantastic. Perfect casting. She nailed Lois Lane. Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner's Green Lantern. Again, didn't really have an opinion on this. I know a lot of people were kind of skeptical because of the look. To me, it's like straight out of a comic book. It was great. Really, really enjoyed it. Millie Alcock's brief appearance, amazing. Already knew she'd be great. Already been following her for years on other projects. So really, really happy with how that's going. And I'm looking forward to Supergirl. And I've seen that a lot of people kind of are comparing this movie to kind of what Barbie was for a lot of women, in respect of kind of how it made them feel, like celebrating kind of femininity and womanhood and everything of that nature, which I absolutely understood. The situation there with Barbie was exactly that, and I thought it was an amazing movie. And I feel like that's an absolute great comparison, because Superman made me feel amazing. It made me feel proud to be like a man. It sounds so silly, like it's not something I really kind of delve into, but there's it's easy to to forget about kind of making sure these characters are positive role models for kids, for young men. You know, in a world that we're living in now, it's so important more than anything else. You know, I'm a father to, you know, a wonderful little girl. I've got another child on the way who may well be a boy. And again, I'd love to ensure that they had a positive role model. So, same for my daughter as well, obviously. But it's just so important having these characters be such, you know, good people and show that, you know, it's not wrong to be good. It's not wrong to be, you know, kind and you know, help people. And it's as simple as that. There's no, you know, secret to what they've done here. It's just a fantastic story that just showcases who Superman is as a character. He is a good person who wants to do the right thing, not because of any secret agenda or, you know, to further his gains in any way, but just because it's the right thing to do. And I think we can really take from that. We needed this film now more than I think we ever needed it. I see such like horrible things going on, horrible kind of hatred, racism, violence, and you see these things online all the time, more so than you ever have. And it's just combating that entirely. Absolutely, you know, you can say it's political, you can make your arguments, whatever, man. It's just, to me, Superman just smashed it because he's just a good person. And James Gunn understands the assignment here. He's absolutely nailed it. I'm very excited to see kind of where they move from here, what the general kind of DC universe is going to look like. I love that James Gunn's sort of saying that we ain't going to make anything unless we have a good script. So there's not necessarily like a set, you know, in stone kind of, we have to make a Batman movie, we have to make a Wonder Woman, you know, like it's just based on good scripts equal a movie get made. Spoiler warning, I am going to talk about spoilers now, so if you haven't seen the Superman movie, you might want to switch off or skip to this point. So there's a few changes that were made to the story which I thought are worth mentioning. The origin story of Superman's parents, being that they've sent him to Earth not to save humanity but to conquer it, and to, you know, spread his gene on and, you know, all that sort of stuff. Now, I was really shocked in the cinema when I saw that. I was like, what? And to be honest, I thought we'd get to the end of the movie and it would be revealed that it was actually all BS and it was like a fake message and everything. And the fact they didn't, I was really surprised about. And at first, I kind of was a bit shocked. I was a bit like, I don't know what to really make of that. But then actually, when I sort of sat on it for a bit, I felt like, what a great idea. To just do something different. I watched some interviews with James Gunn afterwards and I noticed they talked about Superman's S. And David Corenswet is talking in the interview and they say, what does the S represent? And he says, oh, it represents, you know, hope. And then James Gunn jumps in and he says, no, it doesn't. It just means S. S for Superman. Which I thought straight away, I was like, that's linked to obviously the change there in that respect. So it's an interesting choice, and I think we are going to see more of that, more explanation around it later on. They may well turn around and just say, yeah, it's revealed that it's a poor translation and actually doesn't mean what it meant. I know there was a Smallville plotline similar to that, and James Gunn's a big Smallville fan, so it would be interesting, you know, if they've done that for that reason, to sort of pay homage more to kind of Smallville. But I don't think they should. I think they should keep it as it is, and I think it'd be even more interesting if we were to see something like Zod in a sequel, like General Zod. Maybe have Zod be like a close personal friend of Superman's parents, you know, if they were like elitists and, you know, everything of that nature, and then seeing that Superman is not living the life that his parents wanted him to live. I think that would be a really interesting dynamic. So yeah, that's the only thing spoiler related I'm going to talk about. Lex Luthor, fantastic as well. Really, it's probably my best adaptation we've seen of Lex Luthor. Again, Nicholas Hoult, that's the name. Fantastic actor. Obviously seen him in loads. He's been acting forever. He absolutely smashes the role as Lex Luthor. Perfect casting. Really kind of nailed the kind of what Lex Luthor would be like in 2025. I think that's really important to sort of note. It is a very modern take on Lex Luthor that also, you know, remains classic in a lot of ways. That being said, we've seen Lex in pretty much every single adaptation, bar Man of Steel, of Superman, of standalone Superman stories. We've seen Lex Luthor time and time again. Like, he is the main villain of Superman, and that's fair enough, but I'm ready to see something new. So I want to see a proper adaptation of maybe Doomsday. There's a Brainiac. There's loads of villains you could throw in there. Not necessarily even Superman villains, just general DC villains that I'd love to see. Overall, Superman was a fantastic time, and it was truly a treat to watch. And it made me feel like a little boy. And you know what? That's what it's all about. I loved it, and it's just made me want to pick up more and more Superman comics. I've heard that this is made a massive rise in sales of DC and Superman comics. Like, a lot of Marvel movies that come out don't really get people in the comic book shops that much, maybe a little bit, but apparently Superman has managed to get people going to comic book shops again, which is amazing. That's truly obviously what it's all about. So Superman, absolute banger, really loved it. And I'm going to find some great Superman comics to read, and maybe I'll be reviewing them on here. So I will leave you on that one. And out of 10, it's a 10 out of 10. There's no notes. Loved it. Absolutely perfect movie. What did you guys think of Superman? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Take care and goodbye.